Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 11th of October of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to start with Avdiivka. As you know, the Russians yesterday launched a very powerful full-scale offensive operation in this area, and the Russian sources were saying that as a result of some attacks on the south and the north of this area, the Russians managed to maintain their positions, to get new tree lines, to establish control over the new shelters and trenches. But yet we haven't received even a single video confirmation from the Russian sources, and that was very weird and very strange because, of course, it's very interesting where exactly the Russians managed to get, what exactly the Russians managed to capture, and how is the current situation of armed forces of Ukraine. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 330 soldiers, 19 armored vehicles including one tank, and 3 artillery systems. And these are very interesting and very important numbers because the Russians were saying that yesterday they launched a very full-scale, very powerful offensive and artillery attack against the Avdiivka in the area around Avdiivka, and the main purpose of those strikes, artillery strikes, were to suppress the Ukrainian artillery systems, just to win the counter-artillery duels. And now we see the numbers from the Ministry of Defense that as a result of those counter-artillery duels, the Ukrainians lost just 3 artillery systems, and this is very weird, at least for me. Also, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of missile strike and artillery strike, the Russians managed to destroy the concentration of Ukrainian forces in the city by the name of Encirclement in this area. The Russians reported that they managed to discover and to destroy the operational reserves of 31st Mechanized Brigade in this area, and as a result of that strike, the Ukrainians lost 90 soldiers and around 10 armored vehicles. Probably the Ukrainians tried to redeploy some reinforcements and reserves from the city by the name of Pokrovsk using the railway station, railway tracks, and they managed to get this area, but as a result of strike, the Ukrainians were completely destroyed, so without any possibilities to to restore their power. But that was not the only attacks in this area. The Russians were attacking, as we discussed, from the north and from the south. We had just one geolocation from the Russians, and which confirms that as a result of clashes and offensive operations, the Russians managed to establish control over Avdiivka, a landfill that located on the northern part of this area. This is a very important achievement, very important progress. Currently, from this territory, the Russians can control everything in Avdiivka, every single street, every single building, everything. And of course it will ease the further the further way and the further steps of offensive operation in this direction. But of course it's not enough. It's not enough to understand what exactly happened there. Also, if you remember, yesterday we discussed and we saw the video from the Ukrainian sources, how the Russians published the video of bombings, and we saw a very big smoke, black smoke above Avdiivka, and we were wondering what did happen there. And today we got the answer to this question. As a result of artillery probably strike, the Russians managed to destroy the Ukrainian railway train with fuel on board. This is a very interesting operation, and I have a lot of questions how the Ukrainians still have possibility to use the railway tracks, the trains, and to move fuel in this direction. This was a very interesting question I had, but anyways, I understand currently the Ukrainians are no longer have such possibilities. So the reason of very big black smoke above Avdiivka was the destroyed train with fuel on the northern part of this area in the vicinity of the coal mine. At least we know what did happen there. But again, this is also not enough to understand what exactly is going on in Avdiivka. And to get the answer to the question what is happening in Avdiivka, the Ukrainians started publishing their own geolocations, their own videos of clashes for this territory. Of course, we need to understand that the next series of videos, we're going to see the videos that were published by the Ukrainian forces. Obviously, these videos has some propaganda meanings, some propaganda, let's call a vector, because the Ukrainians during that battle, the main goal was to publish, let's say, the Russian losses, to demoralize Russian soldiers, and so on, to make panic among people, and so on. So the Ukrainians published some videos of destroyed Russian armored vehicles, but Before we start, I would like to give you my own opinion. Of course, if we compare the battle for Avdiivka, the Russian offensive operation in this area, with the Ukrainian offensive operation in Robotyne and Bradley Square, obviously these are two completely different operations. First of all, because of number of losses. The Russians probably during the first 2 days of attack in Avdiivka lost 10 times less forces and armored vehicles in comparison with the Ukrainians during the 4th of June of 2023, when the Ukrainians lost their first Leopards and so on. And the second interesting important thing is that Avdiivka probably 10 times bigger and more dangerous and more powerful stronghold in comparison with Robotyne and Verbovo and the fields between these cities. So the task for the Russians is much more difficult in comparison with the Ukrainian one. So let's start from the northern flank one more time. The Russians during the night made some progress, and today some Russian sources published the map of approximately progress of the Russians in this area. And according to this map, we can say that as a result of offensive operation, as a result of strikes and attacks, the Russians managed to even enter Berdichi, but the Russians were attacking on the north, from the northern direction, without entering the city by the name of Stepovo. So for some reason, the Russians took a decision to bypass this area and to attack Berdichi from the north to bypass Stepovo. We got some video from this area that we have already discussed in the morning, the Russian offensive operation, a significant number of infantry that landed from the armored vehicles from APC, and at the end of this video we got the moment when the Ukrainians attacked another Russian APC with a grenade, with missile. So this is the only thing, and probably maybe that video wasn't made exactly in this area. The first geolocation from this area from the Ukrainian side that we got took place between Berdichi and Krasnogorovka, and this is the video of Russian offensive operation that was made by the 116th Territorial Defense Brigade. The video. On this video we see how the Ukrainians, as a result of missile strike or maybe as a result of getting on minefields, the Russians lost at least 2 armored vehicles, 2 tanks. And this video confirms, at least tell us that as a result of attack, the Russians probably managed to get at least this line. But according to the sources, the Russians managed to go further. But when talking about these geolocations between Berdichi and Stepovo on this side of the railways, we haven't received nothing. So this red cloud, I made this red cloud just based on the reports and messages in Telegram. There were no video geolocations about that. So it's up to you. For me, on my regional map, I try to use this territory as a gray zone. We got some videos and some photos from the Avdiivka coal mine. Today the Ukrainian sources also published just photo. There were no video. They published just a photo of destroyed Russian armored vehicles, or maybe not destroyed, but maybe abandoned. From this perspective and from this angle, very difficult to understand whether those armored vehicles were destroyed, just abandoned. Maybe it was just a convoy who was heading to attack. So we have some photos, 5 armored vehicles that were published by the Ukrainians with the words that those armored vehicles were destroyed. For now, it's just like the information that we need to note and keep in our minds. And that's it. So nothing more, nothing special. And during the day, they will publish some videos from the area behind Krasnogorovka, but all these videos dated on the 8th of October. On this video, we see how the Russians were moving along the roads along this area, trying to redeploy forces. This was probably the video of the beginning of Russian offensive operation, when the Russians were trying to get as close as possible the armored vehicles to the combat line. The Ukrainians controlled the situation, and as a result of FPV drone strikes, some number of those armored vehicles were destroyed. At least one of those armored vehicles were destroyed on the road between Novobakhmutovka and Krasnogorovka, probably as a result of FPV drone strike. So this is the situation on the northern flank. From confirmed information, at least with one geolocation, we have the update about the landfill on the north of Avdiivka. We have destroyed a train with fuel, and from unconfirmed information, we have updated that the Russians managed to enter Berdichi. So this is the situation in this area. More details are coming from the southern direction. We, as you can see, have significant number of icons, but the most important icon took place in the vicinity of Severny. I'm talking about this icon. Let's take a look at this video. This attack took place in the morning, in the very early morning. On this video, we can see how the Ukrainians were trying to control the situation using video cameras on the building in Severna. And at some second of this video, the Ukrainians started showing us the process of movement of Russian armored personnel carrier among fields in unknown direction. These armored vehicles was moving. The Ukrainians, as you can see, weren't attacking these armored vehicles with nothing. So these armored vehicles just bypassed fields and continue movements further. So and now it's become very, very interesting. So what is going to be next? At some point of this video ends, and as I understand, this personnel carrier landed infantry, and after that the infantry started moving further. So as you can see, this video is not like the one video. There was like few small episodes that were made in one video. So what does it mean? According to that video, we can say that the Russians started their movement somewhere in Vodyane, then they turned to the right, and then they moved to the north. On this video, we saw how the Russian APC crossed this tree line, and then the Russian APC moved further to the north. And somewhere in this area, the APC, the video with APC ended exactly in this small square. And after that, we saw the movements of the Russian infantry. And the direction of movement of Russian infantry is unknown. So one more time, the APC was moving like to the north, to the right, and then in this area it's disappeared. But this is very important because we understand that, there are a few things that we need to note. First of all is that there were no artillery strikes, that APC was moving pretty safe. No problems, no artillery strikes, no cluster rounds, no mines. So obviously this entire territory looks very secured, and without any problems the Russians were moving. And somewhere from this area the Russian infantry started moving at least probably in two directions. To the north in direction of the road between Severna and Avdiivka, and the possible second direction to the east in direction of Avdiivka and this tree line. And to tell the truth, no matter where exactly the Russian forces were moving, to the north or to the east, obviously we understand that the road between Severna and Avdiivka was cut off as a result of Russian offensive operation. So this road is no longer even under artillery control. This road is already under Russian presence, Russian physical control, not even fire. It includes fire, visible and physical control. So we can say that one of the most important supply roads that the Ukrainians in Avdiivka were using to get some support from the mainland was cut off by the Russians somewhere between 10th and 11th of October. But this is not the final video from this area. Also, we got some updates how video of destroyed Russian tanks. At least we don't know how exactly this tank was destroyed. One more time, this video was published by the Ukrainian forces as well. So just destroyed tank. And we have another video of the movements of Russian APC. Some among fields as a result of missile strike. That armored personnel carrier was damaged, but wasn't destroyed. The Russians managed to land and basically they start running away. So that was another episode somewhere in this area. Another movement of Russian personnel carrier that got probably in minefields or maybe also was attacked by missile, but also nothing bad happened with this. He just stopped and then the Russians evacuated. The only interesting and probably video with violence we have when the Russians landed and captured another tree line. One armored vehicle was destroyed. Probably they were trying to cross this area. The Russian soldiers landed, and at some second of this video the Ukrainians started bombing the Russian positions who just landed in the vicinity of these trenches and captured them. All these events, all these videos were made from Severna using the Ukrainians were using something like a very big high-rise building, and they were making all these videos from this direction, and the Russians probably discovered that at some time and they took a decision to destroy that video camera. And as a result of missile strike, the Russians first of all managed to discover the Ukrainian equipment, Starlink equipment, video camera, probably some communication equipment, and as a result of missile strike, the Russians made the Ukrainians deaf and blind in this area. And after that, we stopped receiving any videos from the Ukrainian side. So that was the situation. That wasn't the only attack to the north. The Russians also made another attempt to attack from the west of Severna. For that purposes, the Russians also started their activity from Piesky. They moved to Vadiana, then they moved to the left, and then they turned to the right and were trying to attack in direction of Toninka. For that attack, the Russians also were using just infantry. We see like a very big line of Russian soldiers with a very big distance between every single soldier. Also, the important things that we can tell about this attack, that the Russians feel themselves pretty safe. There are no artillery clashes, no artillery bombings, no HIMARS strikes. So we see that Ukrainians are completely, they are not doing anything. The Russians are moving so easy, so relaxed, and without any counter like missile strike from the Ukrainian side. Obviously, we understand that maybe, no matter that the Ministry of Defense published the number of 3 artillery systems that were destroyed during the previous 24 hours on Donetsk direction, we see that based on the videos and very relaxed movements of the Russian forces in this area, the Ukrainians were completely suppressed and they lost the artillery duel in this area, at least when talking about 10s and 11s of October. So basically, as a result, as I understand, of clashes that took place today, the Russians managed to establish control, or at least they managed to confirm their presence, at least in this square. So as you can see, this is a very bad situation for the Ukrainians, and now currently the distance between possible Russian positions from Berdichi to that settlement by the name of Severny is just 7 kilometers, and there are just 2 roads left. The road between Orlovka and Avdiivka, and also between Orlovka and the Avdiivka chemical plant. So 2 roads, but it's already half operational encirclement, let's call it like this. To complete this operation successfully, of course, there were a lot of risk that Ukrainians would try to attack the Russians in their flank from Karlovka, Nitailova, Pervomaiska. Obviously, the Russians expected that attack, that Ukrainians will try to attack not just the Russian offensive forces on the north of Vadiana, but also the Ukrainians could attack in direction of Piesky. So to prevent that attack, to reduce the risks, the Russians during the day were bombing this flank with all types of weapon, and that I'm not sure that there was the real targets or like Ukrainian forces. The main purpose of those attacks were to show the Ukrainians that the Russians control the situation and they will destroy everything that will start movement in this direction. So there were no attacks, and basically that operation prevented the Ukrainians from any attempts to attack. Furthermore, the Russians, as a result of counter-artillery duels, managed to discover the Ukrainian artillery position, and Howitzer Panzer Howitzer 2000, but when talking about the Ministry of Defense report, they didn't include this howitzer as destroyed in the report. Maybe we will get this information tomorrow. And there was another artillery system destroyed, the same in this area. So this is exactly what did happen in Avdiivka during the day. Tomorrow, obviously, we're going to receive more updates. This evening, the Russian sources continue publishing the video of smoke and fire above Avdiivka. We will discuss this video in the morning, and we will continue thinking and continue discussion about the Battle of Avdiivka, because as I understand, this battle is not going to finish within the next few days, but it is very important within the next few days, to be more precise, before the weekend, to capture at least one city. This is very important to increase the spirit and morale and just the fighting spirit of Russian forces. If the Russians are not able to capture a city, even a city, before the beginning of the weekend, of course, this may cause a lot of damage to the Russian spirit, because if you remember, Solidar was taken very fast, and now the Russians need to do something like that. They need to repeat the Solidar success. Also, some updates are coming from the south Donetsk direction. After 1 day of operational pause, the Russians activated in this area as well. After the Russians were a little bit defeated while attacking Mikhailovka, they got, if you remember, the Russians got on minefields and a few tanks were destroyed. The Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian positions, and during the previous 24 hours, the Russians were bombing and attacking the discovered positions, the ammo depots and so on. Probably the Russians were pretty successful because few vehicles and ammo depots were destroyed, and also the Russians managed to destroy another Ukrainian tank that was moving along the road and was attacking the Russians on the positions that the Russians managed to capture as a result of the previous attacks. The tank was destroyed. The Ukrainians were trying to evacuate the tank driver, but something went wrong with the machine as well. Probably the Russians managed to send some reconnaissance team, and the reconnaissance team basically made an ambush for a Ukrainian machine. So as you can see, there is a point. This is evacuation team from Ukrainian side who was heading in direction of tank, but at some point something went wrong, and basically the machine fell down, and basically probably the Russian reconnaissance team basically destroyed and shot it from the very close distance. So this video confirms that there is a very high chances that the Russian reconnaissance team is already very close to Novomikhailivka, and they can see the city right exactly in their own eyes, and there is currently the distance of short gunfire. So everything might happen there. Furthermore, the Russians during the day also focused their activity against the Ukrainian equipment. On this video we see how the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian communication equipment, probably Starlink equipment, and many other types of equipment that Ukrainians use for controlling the situation. And as a result of a PV drone strike, the Ukrainians also in this area became let's say deaf and blind, at least for a short period of time. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes on the South Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians lost 155 soldiers. So the level of losses is very heavy, as yesterday, the day before yesterday, as we discussed, on Donetsk direction, 330 soldiers. And probably the most interesting and unexpected numbers we got from the north and Kupiansk direction. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes for Sinkovka, for Ivanovka, Kislovka, Kotlarovka, Makeevka, Berestova, Novoselsky, the Ukrainians lost 280 soldiers, 3 armored vehicles, and 1 tank. So this is a record for this period. I don't remember such a heavy level of losses from the Ukrainian side on the Kupiansk direction. There are also very fierce clashes, but one more time, as the same situation, the same story as in Avdiivka, we haven't received even a single geolocated confirmation about anything from this area. The Russians, according to information we have, continue pressure in Makeevka, but also for now without any progress. The Ukrainians published a video of 2 HIMARS strike. And the Ukrainians, while the Russians attack in Makeevka, of course, they use artillery to support their forces. The Ukrainians, during the Russian attack, tried to discover the Russian positions, artillery positions, and as a result of 2 HIMARS strikes or 3 HIMARS strikes, the Ukrainians did manage to destroy a few artillery systems and artillery positions of forces of Russian Federation. So this is the only events that took place in this geolocated events that took place in this area. When talking about Bakhmut Artyomovsk direction, there are no changes, at least just a local offensive operation of Russian forces in the vicinity of Verkhovka Reservoir. As a result of that attack, the Russians managed to improve their positions and probably to let's say maintain the positions and to get closer to the city by the name of Bogdanovka. Just a little bit. The Russians understand that Ukrainians are not going to counterattack, so why not take another few square meters and to get closer to the Ukrainians? Who knows? Now we are moving to Zaporozhye area. The clashes in this area stopped completely. There are no activity at all. The Ukrainians lost just 20 soldiers during the previous days, so it's nothing. It's like statistical mistake. And but from the other side, the Ukrainians continue concentration of forces in Novodanilovka. The Russians see everything. The Russians control the entire situation. And during the day, we saw a lot of updates about artillery strikes against the Ukrainian positions in Novodanilovka. Just trenches, just a regular military routine without any purpose. And furthermore, from interesting, we can see the FPV drone strike against the Ukrainian T-64 tank. As a result of strike with a very cheap FPV drone, the Ukrainians lost a very big T-64 tank, modernized, upgraded with modern defense equipment like contacts, so very powerful strike. And very interesting video is coming from the trenches in the vicinity of Kopany. On this video we see the movements of Ukrainian forces along the trenches, which confirms that as a result of some activity in this direction, the Ukrainians managed to capture some more territory and to get closer to the cities of Kopany and Nestyryanka. But we'll see what they're going to do next. And that's it for today. Military Samurai channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.